All right, we're live on Facebook. Say hello. Robert McFadden. We're going to be talking about retirement. Dr. Joe Flanders, not Dr. Joe Schwartz, will be talking about mindfulness and how to reduce stress. Hope you enjoyed today's show. We're on soon.
Retirement's perfect for you, Matt. You're almost there.
Oh, yes, yes. Old. Physically and mentally.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Well, you'll want to watch the video again after a few times just to remember things.
Yeah.
The woman who turned the dog into the shelter told him found it last week. Julie Walker, New York.
Test. Someone text. Test.
Yeah, Alouettes lost again. We'll probably do a couple of commercials first.
I'm going to start today with saying you're listening to Life Unrehearsed.
Yeah.
That's how I'm going to start right then.
Yeah.
Straight. Try and go a bit faster if we can.
With your name after, right?
You listen to Life Unrehearsed. I am Stephanie. I'm going to start like that and just jump right in.
Yeah.
See how that flows for us.
No, commercials.
I'm very dehydrated.
You have your agua,
I do, but I'm dehydrated.
but it's hot in here too.
I'm just tired. Feel that cold sore coming.
Here we go.
You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. Good afternoon. I'm Stephanie Erickson, social worker and family caregiving expert, here with my co-host Matt DelVecchio, who specializes in free retirement, home search, and senior transitions. Now, are you worried about what you'll do after retirement with changes, money, time, lifestyle? Well, coming up, we're going to be speaking with Robert McFadden, certified life coach, all about retirement.
Hello there, Stephanie.
Hi, Matt.
How are you?
Excellent.
Summer has arrived.
It's crazy. The weather is so nice right now.
We'll take it. We need it.
I know,
Mother Nature has a way of evening things out. We've got a great show. First half, as we talked about with Robert McFadden. On the second half, Stephanie, hey, are you feeling a little stressed lately this time of year, and maybe looking for ways to reduce that stress?
Yes.
yes. You know what? Maybe the answer is simply by just sitting still and living in the moment. You know, we're going to be talking about a really unique concept called mindfulness after the 4:30 news, and ways about reducing stress and how it will actually make you a better person. So that's coming up after the 4:30 segment.
It's supposed to make you a better person? Oh, this is great. This benefit I didn't know. Excellent. So you're going to start right away right now. Just kidding. So now about retirement, Matt.
Yes.
You and I are so far from retiring, but do you think about it already?
Well, let's see. 51 years old, and someone told me the other day that when you retire, you need something called money, and that might be a problem.
Yeah.
But, we're allowed to dream, and, quite frankly, people in their 50s and their 60s are starting to think about it, and this will be quite interesting. In fact, we're very, very pleased to have, as our guest today in studio, certified life coach, Robert McFadden. Robert, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much. It's great to be here.
It's interesting because there are a lot of people that are retired, a lot of people contemplating retirement. There's lots of upsides, I'm sure. However, there are also a lot of questions to be answered. You've got your little check boxes to be filled in the contemplation process. Obviously, I mentioned financial concerns as one of them. But Robert, what would you say are some of the more popular concerns of people when they're contemplating retirement?
I think you put your finger on quite a number of them right away. There's usually the question about money, because nobody knows what things are going to cost in the future, first of all. I've seen people sock away wads of money, and they're still not sure. I mean, we all have different levels of comfort as to what kind of resources we need going forward. And how far forward are we going? Are we talking, how many years are we talking about, and things.
Beyond financial, Robert, what are some of the other things that people bring up as concerns?
There's things about like just their change of pace, how they're very used to having a certain routine that they're living through in their life, and they're expecting well, they aren't they haven't really thought about it too much, and suddenly it's almost like they're looking over the edge of a cliff, and there's endless time. What they thought they wanted so much, you know,
Maybe
for a
they
month or
don't
two,
want
it can be fun, and then the head
Yeah.
starts scratching. It's like, okay, so what do I, you know?
You
what
can
am I
only
gonna
play
do?
so many rounds of golf before you start losing it. Okay,
There's
we
that.
got to work on
That's
something
right.
else.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
you're bringing up a really good point about pace, because right now I happen to be extra tired. Of course, we have a puppy, which everybody knows, and that's weighing on me heavily in terms of sleep and such. But I often think, oh God, it might be great to be retired. I would have all this time and I can just pursue my passions. But I'm also a very busy person. I do lots of stuff.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that once it comes to retire, I'm going to find myself bored. Does this happen a lot to people?
It happens to some people. You know, boredom is like one thing that can happen. Other people can feel overwhelmed by the whole thing. It's a little bit like there's a couple of different ways in which we can be dealing with things. There's a psychologist, Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi. I probably mispronounced his name, but he has a thing where he talks about optimal experience. And on one hand, it's boredom, where we just don't have enough challenges, and overwhelm, where we have too many. And what you want to be is in the middle.
Which is the same thing for life, actually.
Yeah, no, exactly. You're listening to Robert McFadden, certified life coach, and we're talking about I guess, the ups and downs of retirement. And by the way, if you do want to call in, we'd love to hear from you. And how has retirement been for you? Has it been stressful? Has it been great? Please call us at 514-790-0800 or text us at 514-800. Now, Robert, I'm thinking more from a business corporate side now, and you've got a lot of people that were in their jobs and this was their life.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden they find themselves on the other side of retirement. Their identification up till now was in business. It could not necessarily just be the boss. It could be one of the workers, staff, and this was your identification. And now it's changed and they find themselves wondering, okay, what now?
Yeah, who am I almost?
Yeah, over and over again, the people that I speak with who come to speak with me, there tends to be this emphasis on the position, the responsibilities that they've had in life, and rather than the abilities, the skills, which they can be taking forward, which they can be transitioning into whatever other kind of work that they're going to do, or into their retirement years as well. How can you, rather than, and this gets into the, we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, but it's that distinction between focusing on what you are as opposed to what you're doing.
You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. Stephanie Erickson here, Matt DelVecchio with me, and in studio we have Robert McFadden. We'd like to hear about how you're handling retirement. Give us a call, 514-790-0800, or text us 514-800. Robert, you're talking about the transition of roles. So it's not about necessarily who we are, identifying ourselves like I am a social worker. It should be I'm someone who cares about people. Most of the time I do. I'm someone who can offer such and such to the world. So you're saying like you should transition from identifying yourself with the job title, finding out who you are as a person within that role, and then applying that outside of the job force into your life after retirement, finding things to do.
Yeah, I'm a little hesitant to be telling people what they should be doing or what they have to do
I
or what
like
they
to tell
must
people
do.
what they should do.
Really?
So I do want to put
I
a
am a
caveat
woman,
on
come
that. You know, there may be somebody who's retired and they think of themselves, I'm a retired person, and it puts the biggest smile on their face and they want to sit back. I don't want to say for 1 minute, no, you shouldn't be doing that. Enjoy it, you know. I mean, there's so many different people with different expectations who handle things in different ways. I think that we're talking, you know, maybe hear more about particular instances though where people are finding it uncomfortable, where they're feeling like they've mutated into some other being that they've never experienced before, and how do I do this? You know, one of the things that's handy with this, I think, is even to think about other periods in your life where you've had big changes. When you got married,
That's
when
a
you
good
had your
point.
first child, when you got your first job, when you graduated.
Oh, good point.
It's one of those life stages, and we, you know, if we look back, we'll see we have a lot of experience in transitioning through change. It's another transition.
It's adapting to that change, and it's very interesting. I was in Toronto last week on business, and I was with a gentleman who had just retired a couple years ago, and he was heading up the CARP chapter. CARP is a very big organization for retired people, and he says, Matt, I was so worried about retiring and what to do, and yet he's taking his executive skills and running this CARP organization for that chapter. And I think that's when you were mentioning that and going forward, that was one of the examples that we stood out. Now socially, things must change as well. From the social life with your spouse, and are you going out more? Are you staying back a bit? What do you think about the social side of things, and how should you be prepared to adapt to that?
I think with the there's a couple of different sides to the social thing. One is with your family, so just the in the situation of, say, someone where there's I'm going to say a stay-at-home mom, okay, and then suddenly the husband's around 24/7. It's like,
and I think my mom and I have talked
second.
about that. Robert, I'm going to jump in for a second
Sure.
because we're just about to head out to the traffic center, but I want to talk more about the social demands that we have for families. But first, let's hear from the CJB Traffic Center. Matt!
We were right on the cusp of, I would have had to talk for another 45 seconds. I'll throw a question up there, and then you were going to cut it off.
Let me figure out how to get us out. We did it, Matt. We did it.
It was good.
So we'll go back.
So
to
I'll
social.
go back in on the social side of things. I'll bring it back in traffic. And then anything on that social side that you think we should really focus on?
The first thing is about focusing on yourself and what your needs are and about you. Like we often think that immediately we have to start going to other people, but if we're not clear with ourselves what we want, what our plans are, it can be a problem.
Okay, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So what you want to do versus what you're thinking you should do. Okay.
And I can go from that to.
It's that stepping
first
back.
of all, it applies to life in general anyways, and thinking about what we want versus what other people think we should be doing or we should want. But I'll go from there, Matt, if you're okay with that, and I'll go to so now other people are telling you, oh, now you're retired. Oh, great, Mom, now you can help me with my kids. So how balancing all of those external demands that are now put on you because people have expectations that you have more time available for them, and maybe that's not where you want to put your efforts, and how can you manage that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll go to that after.
Go to the kids part, because that's I think would be good. And then we have to get towards the end, tips on how to best prepare for retirement. So that's going to be one of the things we want to talk about. Which tips would you be able to give to best prepare?
That's going to be interesting.
Do you have any?
In a way, you're almost repeating. You're almost repeating some of the things we're saying.
Yeah, I think probably it's going to be mainly just sort of a reiteration of some of the things that we're saying right now, because there's so many things that people hear over and over about speaking with your financial advisor and blah 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 blah. But those are there are other things that, particularly from the kind of experience that I have, that people may not be familiar hearing with, and they might sort of think, oh, yeah, that's something to consider. Certainly one of doing like an inventory of himself. Of there's a mindfulness aspect too that could be involved in this very quickly. This could get a nice flow into the second half of your show.
So if we ask tips and you talk about people look for the more practical things, like talk to your financial advisor and such, we can always lead into, okay, so that's like the checklist of things we know we're supposed to do, but emotionally, internally, how do you prepare for that shift? Maybe.
Yeah. I'd also talk about spousal relationships, because that changes.
I don't want to say, my mom never listens, but just in case she is, she's terrified of my stepfather, although now he moved his office into the home. And she's terrified when he has nothing to do what it's going to mean. I don't blame her. But I don't think she'll be listening. Oh, unless she's watching Facebook right now.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, there is.
We're being recorded. It's live.
That's all right. I think she's only listened to 3 shows in 6 months, so chances are slim.
Well, maybe there's a 4th in the store. Yeah.
Here we go.
little Simon and Garfunkel for us.
Classic.
You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. My name is Matt DelVecchio, and I'm here with Stephanie Erickson. We're very pleased to have certified life coach Robert McFadden with us. We're talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly of retirement.
That's
and
right.
Robert, just before traffic, we were talking about the social aspect, and I think there's this stigma in a sense that we always see on what others are doing, and we should be doing this or that, but perhaps you were mentioning before, we need to take an internal inventory of what we want to do ourselves first before we start making plans.
It's something that we don't often think about. You know, we're so used to, say if you're going to the grocery store, right? Chances are you're going to whip out a piece of paper or your phone or whatever, and you're going to put, need some bread, need some butter, need some this, that, and the other. If you're going to look for a new home, you're probably going to do something like, okay, we want these many rooms and bathrooms, and we want to have floors like this. And we don't do it with our own life.
So true.
I want to buy a car. Oh, I want this kind of thing and this kind of thing. But when it comes down to what's going to happen in your future, oh, I don't know. You know, we'll see what comes, whatever happens to me.
So how can you do that? So you're saying that we take very practical and pragmatic steps to prepare for all sorts of things in our life, but we don't do it for ourselves. And we're talking specifically about retirement. So how do we do that? How do we take an internal inventory and say, okay, I'm going to have some more time on my hands. I won't have the responsibilities of work. What do I really want? How can we go about starting to do this? Really think about what it is we want. Yeah,
there's a number of different things that you can try. I mean, one very simple one is to sit down and make a list. You can even start by just sitting down and just taking things out of your head of, you know, I want to live here, I want to do this, I want to see that, I want to see whatever, see these people. Another way that people can use sometimes is like you take your CV, all the things you've done in the past. What is it you liked about each one of those things? What things that you really love there? And just make a note of them. What were the things that you didn't like there? What were problems in there? Note those down, but with those things that you don't like, you can be then going to the next question of what is it I wanted to have in place of that.
So it's kind of like removing yourself from the definition of what things are and trying to find the emotional component of what felt good about certain situations, and then applying those feelings to now how can I recreate those feelings in other aspects in my life.
You can be even just going through to like there's an aspect of this which is just like priming the pump. When you start thinking about things that you like, that you love, that you enjoyed, it starts bringing on new things. Right? Often with retirement, we're thinking about our worries all the time, and it's a little bit, you know, I talked the other time too about being stuck in a mud puddle, and we're just so obsessed with the mud puddle that we don't look up and see the beautiful clouds in the sky and the birds twittering in the trees and stuff. We want to take a look up and say, what is it that I do want to have? Where am I heading to?
And you know, that segues right into upside. And you're listening to Robert McFadden, certified life coach, talking about retirement. And we still have a few minutes left in this segment. So if you want to let us know, how's retirement been for you? You find it stressful? Are you enjoying it? So give us a call at 514-790-0800 or text us at 514-800. All right, Robert, there are obviously concerns, but there is an upside to it. And one thing that I see in my world, which happens to be usually on the second half of retirement, when they're looking to go into senior residences or retirement residences, and so often I've heard, I wish I should have traveled when I had more mobility and more health, and now it's too late. Yeah. And when they were in their time, they were thinking about money, and they didn't travel. We have to save up, and it's a catch-22. So from your perspective, one of the upsides is if you have the ability to travel, you put a little money aside, go for it.
Yeah. You know, you're raising a very interesting point there that a lot of us go through our life strategizing that I'm going to get myself to this point, and then I'm going to be free, and then I can go and do all, you know, these things. I had a conversation with someone just recently. They lived their life like now. This is a couple in their one is 62, one is 60. Their retirement happened 4 years ago, and they worked like dogs to retire. And then after 4 years, the husband has come down with just a debilitating syndrome. He's in the hospital, and he's going to be there at least a year, if not more. But so there's this thing about just doing some stuff now. Don't wait until you retire.
Exactly.
You don't have to sell the farm, but
Yeah, live in the moment.
Enjoy the moment too. Yeah.
Right out. Robert, we got a caller in. We've got Tracy from Hudson, and she wants to talk about retirement. Hi, Tracy. Welcome. So, are you retired? Well, congratulations for that. So, how's it going for you, your retirement years? Yeah, so you're talking about the routine, so the change in the routine. Oh, that's so great, Tracy. Well, it's good that you're living in the moment and you've created that plan, and I'm really happy for you. Thank you so much for calling in.
Thank you, Robert. Nice call and exactly what we want to hear. It might take a little bit of an adjustment, but living in the moment, take advantage of it.
I've had conversations with a number of people who when they retire, the first thing they do, it's like, I am just going to lie back and I am going to do nothing, and this is so great, I don't have to, right? And then after it's like a month or two or something, a little bit of boredom starts kicking in. And, I'm thinking one case in particular of someone who, after a bit of time, after laying back, next time I spoke with them, they decided they were going to take a new challenge on. They were going to learn how to speak Mandarin.
Oh my gosh.
Right? Learn how to speak Mandarin.
Good.
So they were going down to the Bibliothèque Nationale doing stuff. And anyway, they ended up going back into the workforce a year later in China.
Oh my God.
That's I want to hear. Interesting. Yeah. I just wrote an article in the Suburban on this exact topic about going to school in retirement. That was Robert McFadden talking about retirement. Matt DelVecchio here with Stephanie Erickson. And popular subject, we have another call. So we're going out to Kirkland, and we've got Devin on the line. Devin, hello.
Hi,
Thank you for calling in.
So wait, hang on just a second, Devin, because we're talking about retirement right now. Do you have a question for Robert related to retirement? Okay. Okay, that sounds like a terrible situation, Devin. So Robert, when people... thanks for calling, Devin. I'm going to pose this question to Robert right now. Robert, what does someone do when they don't have the finances to live when they're in their retirement years? Not that you have the answer for that for everybody, but what could someone do?
I don't have a straight out answer for it. That's something where it's actually important to be able to sit down with somebody and work things out and come up with a plan. And it's not just work that I do as well. There's there's important things to be working with. It may be with lawyers. It may be with who knows who, but there are multiple professionals.
I think it's a real sign, though. We talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly of retirement. That is a very difficult scenario that I think a lot of people are facing, particularly on the financial side, and there's no easy answers to it. So, Devin, thank you for calling in, and we hope things work out.
Robert, I'm just curious. We're getting close to getting out of time here. So we're talking about trying to find that internal place where you know what you want to do and transferring from a work life into a personal life that's fulfilling for you. Do you have maybe just 2 tips that you can give people on a way to start right now thinking about how to make that transition?
Well, there is the part that I mentioned before about starting to put in some more spice into your life right now. Not wait. Don't.
It's not that
waiting.
kind of show, Robert.
Go for it.
There is this thing that's very important. It's about getting clear with yourself first of all about what you want and what you're interested in. It's not just a matter of the things that you're interested in, But it's about getting to know yourself, what you're concerned with, where your worries are, and that about how you speak with yourself. So
Ooh, how you speak with yourself,
you know,
I like that.
yeah. There's also about being able to have good conversations with other people, asking people questions when it's important to do so.
Getting the word out, talking to people, and they're in it. Maybe they've already experienced it. So
Yeah.
I think great advice. And we're already out of time, Robert. We want to thank you
Oh,
very,
there
very
we go.
much. You know, where or how can people reach you if they have a couple more questions?
Well, they could get in touch with me through my website, which is lifecoachmontreal.ca. They can also we'll pop something, I guess, on your Facebook page as
Yeah,
well.
the Life Unrehearsed
Yeah,
Facebook.
So
page.
people
We'll put
can-
a link there.
Yeah, and I've got maybe something I could give you that people could use as a like an exercise to
Good.
do for self-reflection and stuff.
Excellent.
Thanks so much, Robert. So we'll make sure to get all that information on the Life Unrehearsed Facebook page. Coming up after news, do you know about mindfulness? Well, we're going to be talking to a professor from McGill University on how to sit still. Sorry, we had to go very fast there, Robert, at the end.
That was
Okay.
great.
That was really good.
All right. Very good.
That was
Couple
fun.
calls. Now
Yeah,
we'll talk about it after.
Yeah, wait.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say wait.
yeah.
I know that person.
Okay, wait.
Well, I get calls like that once in a while too. So and it's
Oh, Dr. Joe Flanders likes This Matters to me and Life Unrehearsed.
Who's Dr. Joe Flanders?
I've never heard of him.
He's
Guys,
a McGill professor.
Matt, he's crazy. Thanks,
There you are.
Robert.
Well, thank
Robert,
you very
say goodbye
much.
to Facebook. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Until next time.
Thanks a lot, Robert.
There we are. Yeah. Thank you very much for having me back. That was
Pleasure.
lots of fun.
Yes. No,
Pleasure.
it was great.
Yeah.
And someone texted in, we didn't say it, she said, I love being retired. I can do what I want when I want.
There you go.
That's good.
Excellent.
That's good. We'll have to get that in there. We'll squeeze it in.
Okay, folks. Yep, and have a good show.
Thank you. Nice to
Yep.
meet you.
Nice to meet
That was
you as
really
well. Okay.
Bye,
All
Robert.
right. Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
Take
you remember
care.
how to get out and press the button on your way out? There's a green.
I think I do. There's a
Okay.
green button, and
There's a green
we'll do
button.
Here, we're going to open this hard, airtight. There you go.
Away we go.
Green button right over there.
Okay.
Okay,
Have
thanks.
Thank you.
Come on in. Dr. Joe Flanders here in the house.
So
Okay.
my parking meter is going to expire right in the middle of the show.
So,
Can you extend it now?
You can't extend with this
Yeah,
one.
you
Oh, you can. Okay.
Yeah,
yeah,
sure.
sure. Yeah, it's the app, right? Well, it should come up as a,
Oh, I can extend it when I get the reminder.
I believe so, yeah. But that might be
I'll
during
probably
the show.
do it during the commercial break. I'll risk 5 minutes, right?
Okay. Oops.
I was in Toronto. My thing expired at 3 o'clock. I'm rushing like a madman. I get there at 3:04. Not only do I have a ticket on my car, $150 ticket. I've got the tow truck
Oh my God!
ready to
Why?
take my car away.
Why?
Downtown Toronto, and from
Wow!
3 to
Wow!
6,
Wow!
For they do it for traffic.
yeah,
That's
it was
crazy.
brutal.
Wow!
Okay, so I'm going to open up.
Yes, sir.
Maybe the small banter. You
I'll
will
mention
read
it.
the text.
I'll read it. Yeah.
Perfect, and then you'll do the introduction.
Okay. Sounds good. I like that the new way we intro in, that we just dive in. I think it's nicer.
Yeah.
Gives us more time to with the guests.
And banter, we can still squeeze in. We got something there, but we're getting right to the teaser right away. It's good. I like that.
I do too.
What was the head tip there? Not doing this, but doing this?
Yeah. So exactly.
You
'Cause
want to be
you're-
talking into the mic.
So when I look at you, I'm like this, and I'm talking, and then I look at Matt like this. So my mouth is basically the same distance.
Oh, his thing with him. Okay, I thought it was with the camera angle.
No,
No.
I don't care about the camera.
That was-
No, it's more volume. I mean, Robert has a pretty powerful voice, so he pulled back, and I could still hear him, but I still kind of pushed the mic because he started to go back, just to make sure.
accessible showroom on Highway 13 in Laval. Expert installation and service. Severia. Better mobility for life. 1-800.
We probably still have a couple more minutes.
Yeah, we go around 35, 36.
Moving? Renovating? Need long or short-term storage? Check out Pods. Pods. P-O-D-S.
Do you still have one of those cars that go to CLC and ask for a social worker?
Big enough
She
for
should
what
never
you
have been
need
brushed
and
off.
so simple. Pods delivers to your home or site. Fill her up and keep it. Move it to a new house. Across the country. Or send it to the Pods warehouse. Pods. Simple, affordable, and yours whenever you need.
I've talked to that
Storing
lady
Pods is the
25
stress-free
times.
solution. PODSquebec.ca.
I visited her with three times, and she got significant cognitive issues. And she's in a very difficult position. Very difficult position.
Well, I just brought her to the topic at hand, which was retirement.
Yeah.
I didn't hear the call. What did she say?
She's been taken to the bank by her niece and her nephew and her brother, and her parents own the house. It was like these kind of stories, and I said, I'm sorry, do you have a question for Robert about retirement? But that's what we were talking about. And he said, go to a financial advisor, go to a lawyer. He gave some suggestions. What's hard for people is that radio is entertainment. So we have to stick to the topic at hand, and and who says, I mean, I'm a social worker, so I would know where to go to a social worker, but what Andrew Carter is going to say, go to a social worker, he's going to know? I mean, you're a broadcaster, you're not a clinician, right?
I'm wondering if we should even mention you always have the support of the CLSC or a social worker.
You can mention it. I'll mention the text.
Here we go.
You want to mention it, Matt?
I'll open.
If you want to.
What, right? I'm open? Or talk about that?
Yeah,
Okay,
if you want
we'll
to. Let's see.
Why not get a little country music in here
That's
on a
right.
Sunday afternoon? You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Matt DelVecchio, specializing in free retirement, home search, and senior transition support. And I'm here with Stephanie Erickson, social worker and family caregiving expert. Hello, Stephanie.
Hello, Matt. I just want to mention a couple things. We had a text come in the last segment there when we had Robert McFadden. We were talking about retirement. I love this. This woman writes, I love being retired. I can do what I want when I want. And I'm channeling that because I want to do that exactly right now, pre-retirement.
And why not? Why
Yeah,
not?
exactly.
And we also had that poor lady from Kirkland who was having a very difficult time, both
Yeah.
financially and legal matters. And we want to remind everyone, if you really have no place to go, you do have the CLSC as a first resort. They have social workers that help guide you in these difficult situations. So Devin, we hope everything works out for the best.
And Robert did say to have her go to a lawyer. It sounded like she was having legal trouble, so I think that was good advice he gave her, is to speak to a lawyer for sure.
Yeah.
But let's jump right into it. So we have all the time in the world. I'm so happy for this topic because this is a practice that I have taken up, although I might be schooled and find out right now that I'm not doing it right. But we're going to talk about the benefits of mindfulness, and I'm wondering if sitting still and just observing each detail at the present moment is actually beneficial for our health. In studio, we have with us Dr. Joe Flanders. He's a professor at McGill University and the founder and director of the Mind Space Clinic. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks. Nice to be here.
So, Joe, is it really that simple? I just sit still, pay attention to what's happening around me, and my health improves.
It's a little more complicated, but that's,
Oh, no.
I figured, hey, just those spouses that are
Yeah,
sitting on the couch doing nothing, maybe they're onto something
Hey!
right here.
there is something to say for keeping it simple, as we'll see as we get into our conversation here.
So it's not that simple. So what is mindfulness then? It's not just because I was under the impression it's just kind of sitting still and observing what's happening in the moment. Like, oh, I smell the flowers, I feel the wind on my skin, I hear the laughter of my daughter, something like this. Is it more than that?
I think you described it actually quite well. I would say mindfulness is a state of mind where we're sort of open and receptive to what's happening in the present moment. And so it's a skill that we need to develop because our minds are sort of by training and by habit so distracted all the time. And the fact is that by getting good at the skill of mindfulness, all kinds of health benefits do arise.
And that's Dr. Joe Flanders and Dr. Flanders, and off air I called you Dr. Flanders, and you said.
Call me
Dr.
Joe.
Flanders is my dad.
Yeah, that's right.
So we'll call you
That's
Joe.
what
All
we're
right.
calling Joe.
So we'll go as Joe. And we just had another Dr. Joe prior to the show, but this is Dr. Joe
Different Dr.
Flanders.
Joe.
That's right. So thanks for joining us. It's a very interesting concept, and we're going to hear more about it. But when I first heard it, it sounded like meditation to me. Isn't this just meditation? So is there a differentiator between this and meditation?
So mindfulness is a form of meditation. So there's Zen meditation, there's Vipassana meditation, and there's mindfulness meditation. So it's a class of meditation practice. It's also the state of mind that we were just speaking about. And I like to talk about mindfulness as a kind of outcome. It's like the skill that you develop, and the practice that you do is meditation. So you meditate a lot, and then you get good at mindfulness.
You meditate a lot. Okay, so we're going to have to break that down to get some good tips on how to meditate. But I just want to talk first, before we get to how to actually go about it, about some of the benefits. Before we went on air, we were talking about how there's been a lot more research these days about the benefits of mindfulness, and research is showing it, which is helping the field, because now people can put some science to it and they tend to start believing it, and then it goes out into treatment centers and stuff. So talk to me a bit about some of the physical and mental health benefits that we've seen through research.
Sure. So most people are aware that chronic stress has a variety, a broad range of health, negative health consequences. And you could think about practicing mindfulness as, in many ways, a really powerful antidote to many of those things. So in chronic stress...
It's your blueberries for your mind.
There you go. Yeah. In chronic stress, our bodies and our minds are sort of constantly, chronically over-aroused, overexcited, over-stressed. And mindfulness, as I say, is a nice way to sort of break some of that chain of just being activated so much. And so a lot of the health benefits arise as a consequence of not being chronically stressed. So our bodies are less hyper-aroused all the time in a physiological sense. Maybe cardiovascular risk is going to be diminished. And of course, the biggest impact, I would say, is in the field of neuroscience and some of the impacts on how meditation can affect the brain. And in mental health, a variety of disorders and mental health issues can be resolved through treatments that are based on mindfulness.
You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. That's Dr. Joe Flanders. We're going to call him Joe. And Joe is the founder and director of the Mindspace Clinic and a professor at McGill University on this unique concept of mindfulness. So obviously some very significant mental benefits, physical health benefits as well. When I was reading through it, I had never heard about it. And what I thought was interesting was it really helps you with your listening skills and helps you become a better communicator.
Sure. Yeah, it's one of the things that comes up a lot in our trainings. I don't know if you ever had this experience, but I know I have. When you're talking to somebody, you're sort of, in a way, in parallel, kind of working your agenda. So how am I going to respond to that? And what's a good time for me to jump in? I really want to make this point. And we're only really paying attention like maybe half the time to the person. And when you develop something called mindful speech or mindful communication or mindful listening, you develop the habit and the capacity to be fully present with the person. And you listen really to understand, as opposed to really get your point or establish what you want to establish in the conversation. And one of the consequences of that, many people report, and there's some research on this as well, is that there's just a deeper, more meaningful connection and much clearer communication, which kind of cuts off a lot of those misunderstandings, a lot of some of the negative outcomes. And so it's a really nice way to feel more connected. And we know, you guys know this very well, that happiness and health in the long run depend very much on our relationships. It's a very key skill.
Yeah, and I would actually argue that one of the things that is the most important, or maybe the most, is our relationships and connections with others. Because, Matt and I see it in our work, and I'm sure you see it too, Joe, is at the end of someone's life, they're not talking about, the job that I had. They're talking about, I wish I would have connected with my daughter. I wish I would have listened to her when she came to me crying about such and such that was going on at school. And it really is a lot about the relationships. So when you do these techniques or these workshops with people, do couples come in together? Is that a part of mindfulness? Can you do mindfulness communication classes too, or is it just for yourself personally?
Well, we've done lots of training with couples. I would say that most commonly our trainings happen in groups, and sometimes couples join the group together. And I've done plenty of kind of meetings or trainings, me and a couple. And sure, this is an important part of how we develop our mindfulness skills in relationship.
Yeah, it's very interesting. That's Dr. Joe Flanders talking about mindfulness. I guess one of the things that we're all want to know is just the steps of how this process works. Is very, very intriguing. And
yeah, but even beyond the steps, Matt, I want to know how much time does it take? Because which is part of what you're talking about is you're supposed to take time, and then you'll, I guess, enjoy your life more if you just take that time. But that's a struggle too, huh?
Exactly. It's a balance that somehow you're going to have to work out. So when we come back, we're going to be talking to Dr. Joe Flanders about the steps and the amount of time that will be required. And our show is called Life Unrehearsed. The show is also live, and when live shows, things happen. And there happens to be a fire alarm at the traffic center going on, so there will not be a traffic report right now. And we're just going to head into commercials right away, and we're going to talk about the steps of mindfulness when we come back.
So he gets that feed, I don't.
I'm getting the feed in the ear trying to listen.
So what do you know about this fire?
So there's a fire alarm at the traffic center, which isn't in this building.
Okay.
It's in another one. So the fire. So they all left the building.
Oh my.
So there's no traffic report.
Okay, there's a fire alarm, not necessarily a fire.
Right.
Yeah.
I like the way we went back. I'm happy we talked about that CLSC because I'm sure other people were thinking.
And I'm also glad we said, and Robert gave good advice, I think we need to go legal. Because I also want, for me, it's important that people understand that we're not clinicians
We're
here.
not the experts.
We're broadcasters, and so, we can't be expected to have all of the answers and stuff, but I think it was good we went back to it.
But you'll have 99% of the answers.
Well, I have them all. But
she
all
just
of
holds back. Okay, so yes, so I was going into the steps, and just because I had him going in my ear, so
I don't know if you want to mention this, but Jimmy Fallon. Did you see this? A few weeks ago, Jimmy Fallon had a relatively famous meditation teacher on his show, and they meditated live on the Late Show or whatever it is. So I don't know if you want me to mention that, or you want to actually do a meditation live on the air, or I could just
I think
describe the steps.
visually it's going to be better. You should come on This Matters to Me and do it there because it's visual.
yeah, that would
Here
be
it's
good
not
for
visual.
that. Yeah, I'm thinking that it won't flow well from the listener's perspective.
Yeah. And I don't know that you need to mention Jimmy Fallon, but we can talk about it for the other platform. Might be better visually. Matt, I know we said you're going to ask for the steps.
Yeah. So you're coming back from traffic, so you...
Okay, so this is what I'm thinking of saying is, before we went to commercials, Matt was asking about the steps, and I want to get to the steps, but before we get to that, tell me who can benefit, because I want to kind of end with what now, how do we do it, and let's talk about who could benefit, and then you can lead into, okay, now what are the steps? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. You're acknowledging what
Exactly.
So that's good. And then in terms of the steps, you're okay with that? You'll just go through the process. So I guess I'd like to speak from the perspective of, I just heard you on the show, and I'm reaching out to you. What happens now? What do I do? What are the next steps of
I see. To contact me or to
well,
start
no, you're
meditating,
gonna
or
have. Now, I guess no. You're gonna have it at the
If I
end.
want to start practicing this today,
Yeah.
if I say, this sounds really good, so what am I supposed to do? Do I sit with my legs crossed like this?
Okay, so this is for this first question.
No, I'm going to say we're going to get to the
who can
steps in a
benefit?
minute.
Okay, sure.
We'll get to that, but first I want to talk about who can benefit from this kind of a practice, and then
And
we'll get
then
into what
if
are
I
the
wanted to
steps.
start, what would I do?
How do I
I'm
get
just
this
going to
started?
say, close your eyes. I'm going to say,
Exactly. No. So maybe we're going to have more time, or maybe he's doing more commercials.
Yeah. We're off at 56 anyways, so we're already down to 7.5 minutes. And usually they do traffic, which is about a minute and a half, so maybe we'll gain a minute, or they're going to just put a minute of commercials. No, they're going to put a minute of commercials.
Go to mypuppy.com, use the promo code CJAD to get 50% off your own 4-pack. Or call 1-800-444-JAD.
No more.
So I'll ask, okay, what can I do right now?
How do I start?
It's the all-new run-on
And we're not
savings
gonna,
event at Shell. For every liter of Shell fuel, you save
we won't
3
call it
cents
for
on your
callers.
IGA bill.
No.
The second half is always so quick,
3 cents. 40
and we're
liters,
gonna have like probably 5, 6 minutes. So
100 liters, $3.
we'll just be ourselves.
And your coupons can add up to $10. For limited time only.
And,
during the
oh,
run-on
I'm coming in,
savings
right.
event at Shell. Get your
Am I
coupons
going out?
assigned.
Beth
Use
Citron?
that service
Mhm.
station.
This is Life
Oh,
Unrehearsed
good.
with Matt
Oh, we got a bit.
and
We got an extra
Erickson.
30 seconds.
Siberian Mobility Products, providing you better mobility for life. Call them at
You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. Stephanie Erickson here with Matt DelVecchio. In studio, we have with us Dr. Joe Flanders, who is the founder and director of the Mindspace Clinic, and we're talking about mindfulness. That song from Van Halen is perfect. Right now, that's what this is about, is like living in those moments. Matt asked you before we went to commercials, because we couldn't do traffic, a bit about the steps that people can take to start this practice right away, and we are going to get to that in a minute. Before we get to that, though, Joe, I'm just curious, who can benefit from this? I mean, I have anxiety, which we've talked a lot about on the show. My son has anxiety. I use mindfulness. I do use this, and I do use a bit of meditation. It's helped me a lot. So anxiety for me is kind of like a no-brainer. Who else could benefit from mindfulness?
Sure. Many people will say, "Oh, meditation. There's no way I could do that. My mind is too busy, or I have ADHD, or whatever." And that's really nonsense, I would say. Meditation and mindfulness is really about managing life's difficulties and challenges skillfully, and it's also about learning to appreciate those moments where things are going well. And so anybody that will experience some stress in their life at some point could benefit, and anybody that wants to enjoy the present moment more can benefit.
You know, it's quite interesting the way you explain that. It's just not a
Sounds
stress
simple.
reducer.
Yeah.
It could be applied in so many ways, and we use that example of someone at work and being a better listener due to it, better communicator, and it makes you a better person in general. So I think that's quite excellent. Okay, Joe, I'm your client.
Okay.
Our legs are crossed.
I like to trust.
Are
We
you
need a little-
levitating?
little-
That's a great one.
Yeah, we're levitating right now.
So bring me through it. What do I have to do? I need help, and how do I go through this process?
So I think the key basic steps are to find something in your experience in the present moment to anchor your attention on. So we most commonly use something in the body, because the body is always present. You can't breathe 5 minutes ago. You're breathing now. So you find the sensations of breathing in the body. You could also use other senses. You can use your vision to like find something to look at or listen to something, and just take an interest and an open and curious attitude towards that thing that is unfolding in the present moment.
So if it's breathing or vision, am I visualizing something, or
Yeah.
just concentrating on the breathing and just go in that moment?
Just paying attention, whether it's through listening or feeling in your body or looking, paying attention to that one thing that you've made your anchor.
I think for me,
And-
Matt, when you're asking, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Joe, but when you're asking about that, for what I do is, for example, when my kids are outside, they're playing, or with the puppy, and we're outside, and I'm watching it, but I'm not just watching it, I'm living it. I'm going, oh, look how cute my kids are. Look how they're interacting with the puppy. Look at their smile. So it's almost like I'm in my head acknowledging what I'm living, and that helps me sort of kind of ground myself in the moment. I don't know, is that right?
That's really interesting. You're sort of enhancing certain aspects of your experience by really pointing to them or encouraging yourself to tune
Yeah.
into them. Yeah. So that there's definitely, that's kind of I would think of that as a bit of a gratitude practice, maybe.
Okay.
And what I would encourage people to do to sort of get into a pure mindfulness kind of practice would be to take an interest in what's happening in that moment, and then do your best to stay there.
Oh,
Because when we do that,
and now you got me.
you'll probably notice that when we try to pay attention to one thing, our mind jumps around to a
Yeah.
million other things. And this is where the magic really happens, or this is where the skill building really happens. So you're paying attention to something, and then within a millisecond or 10 seconds, your mind wanders off to something else.
Oh, whoops, I forgot to write down that I need bread tomorrow or something.
Bingo.
Yeah.
And this is the key part, because this is how our mind works. And maybe some people are thinking, well, I'm supposed to be present here, and I'm doing it wrong if my mind has wandered off. And that's the whole, the key there is this non-judgmental and open attitude that we're trying to cultivate, where it's like, oh, wow, incredible. My mind just went off to that other thing. So bring it back. And you bring it back. And you do that. You might have to do that 1,000 times. You're practicing for 10 minutes. But this is the repetition and the skill development that's training your brain in this new way.
It's Dr. Joe Flanders talking about mindfulness, and you're listening to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Matt DelVecchio here with Stephanie Erickson. So, Joe, I'm envisioning that 6-foot putt that never goes in. So if I envision it really hard, it's going in. You brought up an interesting point. And in listening to you, you're just training the mind as if it's an exercise.
Like it's a muscle.
Yeah, it's just it's a mental training exercise, but it makes a lot of sense when there are so many distractions in our lives, and try to get into that zone. So I would imagine outside environment factors play a role. You want to put yourself in a position that you're not distracted.
Sure. Let me just say really briefly this notion of training the brain like a muscle. This is a relatively new development in neuroscience and neurology. We used to think that the brain was relatively fixed. But we now know that the brain is an organ of experience, and it's adapting and shifting and remodeling itself depending on what's actually going on in our lives. And we can actually change the structure and function of the brain in attentional areas and emotional areas to get more skilled and more efficient at mindfulness. So it's really quite exciting.
So we're starting to run out of time, Joe. I just want to get back to Matt's point so you can just answer real quickly. So he was talking about the environment. So the first time we try this, is it important that we remove ourselves and go in a quiet space, or should we go ahead and just try it in the car wherever we're at?
Sure. So because we're trying to get really sensitive about distraction and really stay in the present moment, it tends to be easier to be in a quiet space when you're alone. If you're like the Roger Federer of tennis, then you can go meditate in traffic. But if you're just beginning, it's probably good to do it in a quiet room when you're on your own.
Joe, that was fantastic. We're already out of time. That's Dr. Joe Flanders, founder and director of the Mindspace Clinic and professor at McGill University. Joe, how can people reach you?
So probably the easiest place is mindspaceclinic.com. I'm also Dr. Joe Flanders on Facebook and Twitter, and really looking forward to hearing from people.
Awesome.
Thank you
so
very much. Now, next week, you could join us as we talk with Beth Citrin about dignity and caregiving. And we have a really interesting guest. We have a mom of a transgender teen that will be talking to us. So thank you very much for listening to Life Unrehearsed. You can catch us every Sunday live at 4 o'clock. News shortly. Okay.
All right.
That was good.
Excellent.
That was good.
Yeah,
I think it was good because I think it gave a great overview and like skills people can start with. So I didn't realize that's more gratitude practice.
We gotta say goodbye to
I
Facebook.
just sort of made that up. I mean,
He's
Joe,
an
say
imposter.
goodbye to
An
Facebook.
imposter. Bye, Facebook.
See you later.
if you are, see you later. If you are